The British royal family operates on a currency of symbolism. Every public appearance, every sartorial choice, every uttered word is a carefully weighted coin in the vast economy of public perception. It is a silent, continuous ballet where the slightest misstep can echo for generations, and a perfectly executed gesture can, at least temporarily, steady a rocking crown. In the turbulent wake of early 2022, as the House of Windsor navigated the twin milestones of a Platinum Jubilee and the passing of its matriarch, Queen Elizabeth II, this ballet became a high-stakes performance on a global stage. Against this backdrop, two events, seemingly disconnected, unfolded in rapid succession, creating a narrative chasm that laid bare the monarchy's most pressing challenges and its desperate strategy for survival. First, on the cold January morning, a legal and ceremonial earthquake shook the foundations of the royal family. Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, second son of the late Queen, was formally stripped of his military affiliations and royal patronages, and would no longer be referred to as His Royal Highness in an official capacity. This was not merely a demotion. It was a public unmaking, a severing of the prince from the institutional body of the monarchy he was born into. The decision, ratified by his mother, the Queen, and his brother, the then Prince Charles, was a direct consequence of the swirling, toxic maelstrom of the Virginia Giuffre civil lawsuit, which alleged sexual abuse, allegations Andrew vehemently denied but could not publicly escape. Then, just days later, a contrasting image flickered across news feeds and front pages. Princess Beatrice, the Duke's eldest daughter, was photographed leaving a London children's hospital. It was an unofficial, surprise visit, devoid of the usual press pack. She was dressed not in formal attire, but in an understated, approachable outfit, her expression one of warm engagement. She had been visiting sick children and the staff who cared for them, a classic, heartstring-tugging piece of royal philanthropy. The timing was, to any seasoned observer of the royal court, impeccable. It was a masterclass in visual public relations, a deliberate and potent counter-narrative. This was not a coincidence. It was a calculated pivot, a strategic deployment of the monarchy's most valuable asset, a relatable, blameless, and modern royal. The story of these few days is not just about a disgraced prince and his dutiful daughter. It is a profound case study in reputation management, a lesson in how the world's oldest and most famous monarchy sought to cauterize a wound inflicted from within by presenting a sanitized, compassionate face to the world. To understand the full weight of Beatrice's hospital visit, one must first comprehend the profound gravity of what had been taken from her father. The title, His Royal Highness, is more than a form of address. It is a constitutional and symbolic linchpin. It denotes a direct working connection to the crown, a person who embodies the state and represents the monarch. To be an HRH is to be a living pillar of the institution and the monarchy. Therefore, the removal of this style, particularly for a son of the sovereign, is an act of almost unprecedented institutional self-preservation. The weight of HRH. Historically, the denial or removal of the HRH style has been a tool reserved for the most severe breaches of royal protocol or threats to the crown's stability. King George V's issuance of the letters patent in 1917, which narrowed the scope of the title, was a direct response to the anti-German sentiment of World War I and a desire to streamline the monarchy. The most famous modern precedent before Andrew was the fate of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor following Edward VIII's abdication in 1936. The former king, who had chosen a relationship with Wallis Simpson over the throne, was granted the title Duke of Windsor, but was explicitly denied the HRH style for his wife, a brutal and lasting snub designed to quarantine the couple's toxicity from the rest of the family. For Prince Andrew, the loss was of a similar magnitude, though for vastly different reasons. It was not an act of romantic spite, but one of cold political necessity. The allegations stemming from his association with the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein were a catastrophic reputational crisis. The car crash interview with BBC's Newsnight in 2019, where he displayed a staggering lack of empathy for Epstein's victims and offered a series of implausible alibis, had turned public and media sentiment irreversibly against him. He became unusable, a walking public relations nightmare. The civil case filed by Virginia Giuffre was the final straw. While a financial settlement was reached out of court with no admission of liability, the damage was done. The monarchy, poised to celebrate its platinum jubilee and with a 95-year-old queen whose health was declining, could not afford to have such a figure in uniform representing Her Majesty as Colonel of the Grenadier Guards or carrying out official duties. The institution was facing a crisis of relevance, and Andrew had become its greatest liability. The statement released by Buckingham Palace on January 13, 2022, was a model of clinical efficiency. It was brief, unemotional, and devastatingly final. With the Queen's approval and agreement, the Duke of York's military affiliations and royal patronages have been returned to the Queen. The Duke of York will continue not to undertake any public duties and is defending this case as a private citizen. The key phrase, added shortly after, was that he would no longer use the style His Royal Highness in any official capacity. This was the palace machinery at its most ruthless. It was a sovereign act of amputation, cutting away a diseased limb to save the body. The message was clear. Prince Andrew was now a private individual in the eyes of the institution. The monarchy had officially and publicly cast him out. The fallout was immediate. Newspapers, which had long circled, now descended. Editorials proclaimed the end of his royal life. Pundits discussed the humiliation of a prince who had once been his mother's favorite, the charismatic naval officer who had fought in the Falkland War. The narrative was one of a spectacular fall from grace, a Shakespearean tragedy playing out in real time. For Andrew, it was a profound personal and public humiliation. For his family, it was a necessary, if painful, act of triage. But for his children, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, it presented an intensely personal and professional dilemma. They were now the daughters of the royal family's pariah. The lives of Beatrice and Eugenie have always been lived in the unique penumbra of the monarchy, close enough to feel its warmth and privilege, but far enough from the direct line of succession to be spared its most intense scrutiny. As the grandchildren of the monarch, they enjoyed titles, a place at family events, and a level of fame, but they were not, and are not, working royals. They have careers, Beatrice in tech and venture capital, Eugenie in the art world, and they fund their own lifestyles. Their father's scandal placed them in an impossibly difficult position. The bonds of family loyalty, particularly in the tight-knit, often insular world of royalty, are powerful. They had publicly and privately supported their father, standing by him through the initial Epstein revelations and the Newsnight interview. Yet their own futures and their own standing within the family and the public eye were now inextricably linked to his disgrace. The name York had become a byword for scandal. For Beatrice, a young mother, her daughter Sienna was born in late 2021, and a woman trying to build a credible career in the serious world of business, this was a significant burden. How could she be taken seriously as a forward-thinking businesswoman if her most prominent public association was with a sordid global sex scandal involving her father? The media spotlight, which had once focused on her wedding and her fashion choices, now carried a more sinister, intrusive glare. Furthermore, their position as non-working royals became even more precarious. The royal family, under the direction of the then Prince Charles, was moving towards a slimmed-down monarchy, focusing resources and attention on the direct heir and his immediate family. The York sisters, and their disgraced father, were on the periphery of this new vision. They risked being entirely sidelined, their royal connections becoming more of a curse than a benefit. In this context, their strategy had to be one of quiet, diligent, and impeccable conduct. They could not afford a single misstep. Their public appearances, now more scrutinized than ever, needed to project an image of stability, maturity, and positive contribution. They had to distance themselves from their father's troubles, not through public statements or disavowals, which would be seen as disloyal, but through the consistent, quiet force of their